Today we're gonna see the ultimate fantasy romance guide for newbies, and we're gonna do so sharing 24 fantasy romance books divided per different categories, right? We are gonna see how these books feed into the fantasy romance world, paying attention into how can I get you to read these books depending on what you're more used to read. And we will see romance, young adult, new adult, and adult fantasy. And let's start with romance. So in here we'll see books that have at its core a huge amount of romance. If you're an avid romance reader, you'll feel really comfortable with these books because although there's world building, although there's a lot of a story, a lot of epicness, and of course fantasy at its core, it revolves mainly around the relationship of the characters and everything. It's kind of like second step. And in here there are 6 books. And the first one is going to be From Blood and Ash. From Blood and Ash, it's gonna be a long series. There's already 4 books out, but honestly, it's currently one of the most talked about fantasy romance books out there, so you really are kind of like safe getting into this train as of now. It starts being mainly romance. Eventually, it will get more into the fantasy element, the paranormal elements that this book has. It also has a prequel, which is also honestly pretty good. So if you have already read From Blood and Ash, I also really recommend reading the prequel. And From Blood and Ash follows our girl, Poppy. It's what it's called a maiden, this very sacred person that it's supposed to play a very important role within their society. Due to that, she has been veiled all of her life. No one can speak to her and she has very limited space. However, she has decided from very early on that she really deserves more, and she has been training, fighting, and one night she goes out, she finds this man, they have this little moment, and the story unfolds from there. Really recommend. Then following this line, another book series that it's already finished is a trilogy that I thought it had a lot of romance, it had a little bit of fantasy, but it wasn't kind of like the main thing. Again, mainly in the first book, it's the Bargainer series. The Bargainer series, it's really such a comfort read for me. It reads really fast because it has tons of dialogue. The dynamics between the characters, it's just so sweet, but at the same time, it's a little bit spicy. So I guess it checks a lot of boxes within romance. And this story talks about our girl that it's somewhat of a siren. She has this amazing power with which she can compel people to do whatever she likes. However, life for her hasn't been really easy, and she has been taking these favors from the Bargainer. The problem is that every time that she asks for a favor, the Bargainer kind of like enslaves you a little bit more. So she has a lot of tokens on her of these favors that she needs to repay, and no one knows why the Bargainer hasn't called upon those favors before. But one night, the Bargainer comes knocking at our main character's door, asking for her help dealing with a mystery, and the story unfolds from there. And we go now to a series written by an author that is super popular, but what you'll see will surprise you, and that is the Green Creek Saga, with the first book, Wolf Song. This is a paranormal fantasy romance, and in here we will have wolves and mainly warlocks. It currently has a 4.36 stars on Goodreads, which is pretty good. It's gonna be a very emotional read and also like a very cozy one in a way, although our characters suffer. An incredible blend between a character and a plot-driven story. We'll have a little bit of a chosen one, friends to lovers, and it's a queer story that it's really engaging. And the story will kick off with this very cozy, foresty vibe with this guy, Ox, which is our main character, just, living his life. And then one day, this weird family comes and moves in very closely to him. And so from that point onwards, like the relationship between these two families will get even closer. But then one day something really wrong happens, and the story unfolds from there. The different books are told under the point of view of different characters, and in each of these books there's a certain love stories. And then we go to a concluded duology that it's fairly new called These Hollow Vows. This is a little bit of a blend between A Court of Thorns and Roses and The Cruel Prince, let's say. It's at its core a slow burn, like a little bit of a chosen one, a love triangle, and a little bit of an enemies to lovers. So it really has some of the most popular tropes within romance, I think. building. The world building, it's fairly easy to get into because it's a portal fantasy, so you just need to understand that, you know, like human world and then fantasy world, fae world. And because we will spend a lot of time with our main character and, you know, the relationships that she is building, and it currently has a 4.07. And these Hello Bows will tell the story of our main girl Bree, who lives in the human world, right? And she hates the fae, and then one day her sister will get kidnapped by this fae, and she will need to start this quest of saving her sister and, you know, just falling in love, fighting between who is good, who is bad in this world, and find herself and her own, you know, presence. The thing that I really loved about this series, it's not just the relationship with her and, you know, like these two male characters that was like really slow burning, but also that we will have two different courts within the Fae land. So we will have kind of like the good ones and then the bad ones, Golden Sealy and then Shadow Sealy. You know, I thought that was fascinating. And also there's going to be kind of like a quest of finding mythical artifacts, and that's always kind of like a hit. And in here there are another two fantasy romance books that I really believe you will love. The first one, it's A King So Cold. Now this is one of the most spicy books that you'll find in this list. The premise is fascinating because we will see our girl who is the queen. She was betrayed by her husband, and as a result she punishes him. The thing is that she is still in love with him, and although she has made him forget, it's now her time to make him remember why he betrayed her, the terrible thing that he did before killing him. The love triangle that you'll see in this book, it's out of this world. It's so well done. Characters are nuanced, and the story is just so compelling. And in here we will also have the Once Upon a Broken Heart series by Stephanie Garber. Now, 2 books out of the 3 are out. First book, it's okay. Second book is to die for. You need to read it. I am obsessed. And this story happens in the same world as the Caraval series, so it's very whimsical, very fairy tale-esque. But I feel that the author over-explains parts and that it's really easy to get to understand those points. But even if you don't, the main thing here and whatever makes this book so incredible is the relationship between the main characters. There's just this slow burn that it's... But if you're used to read young adult, which usually has a little bit of romance, but you want to take that into a next level, I really recommend this next books, because although it will keep this younger tone, in overall the main element won't have as much romance as in the previous category, what we will see here are dynamics that are really fantastic, and the romance, it's really a key part of the story. And the first one, it's gonna be Caraval. Caraval, it's a concluded trilogy, one of my favorites. The way in which the author writes, it's amazing. It's one of my favorite worlds to be. It really is whimsical, it really is cozy and magical. It has all of this circus vibe, but in such a way that it's also almost fairy tale-esque. It has enemies to lovers, an amazing slow burn, and it almost has a quest at its core, especially book 1. I've already said this before, but the main characters in this trilogy are honestly fantastic. And so the first book, Caraval, tells the story of these 2 sisters that are having kind of like not such a good life, and they really want to get away. And then one day they receive these invitations to go to Caraval, this circus that comes every now and then, that it's completely magical, and that every year has kind of like a game within it. But upon arriving, one of these girls is kidnapped, and the other soon discovers that this Caraval game will consist on finding her sister. And if she is not able to find her before this Caraval game ends, she will die. And so she will be following different clues. It's very different book 1 from book 2. It actually changes points of view, but it really worked for me as well. So really recommend. And another book that for me is kind of like a hidden gem, but I really think it works. It's The Black Witch. And The Black Witch is an unconcluded series, so damn it. But 4 books are already out. It seems that it's going to be 5, so we just need to wait a little bit longer. And this is a series that honestly masterfully plays with my heart. It really has one of the best love triangles that I've seen in a while. The characters are fantastic. The pace was really on point. And The Black Witch tells the story of our girl Elorin, who is a witch. She descends from the Black Witch, who is this very powerful mage that restructured how this whole world lived. In this world, there are different races, species. We will have wyverns, we will have nymphs, dragons. It's a lot. This story kicks off with her being part of the mages who are the most conservative of them all, because in their society she needs to marry very, very fast, very young, and one of her family members saves her from all of these by taking her into the university, where she will need to meet other people, break her mental models of how the world works, and she will be part of a bigger scheme of things that it's happening. It's kind of like a revolution kind of stuff. And now we're gonna see one of my favorite young adult books of all time, and that is A Strange the Dreamer. This is a duology. It's also concluded, and it's such a whimsical read. It's somewhat slow and fairly character driven. In terms of magic, we will have this soft magic system, so you know, like people has powers and these powers are different, but there are not a lot of rules. It's a little bit of a coming to age, a slow burn, and almost a quest. Of course, A Strange the Dreamer has a 4.28 stars and it has been rated by more than 100,000 users. Fair warning though, it really has a little bit of a descriptive prose. And Strange the Dreamer will mainly follow 2 points of view here. The first one is going to be of Laszlo, this extra cinema role who really is a little bit of a misfit. He has lived all of her life in complete obsession about this magical city called Weep. And so no one really believes that Weep exists. And one day people from Weep comes into Laszlo's village seeking help because something really bad is happening and they need help from outside people to help them resolve it. And it's in that point where we will meet the other character who lives within Weep, and you know, like the story unfolds from there. Then we move to another concluded duology which I absolutely adored, and it's A Flame in the Mist. This is an Asian-inspired story. Mainly it's going to be this very feudal Japanese setting, and we will be following our girl as she does a little bit of an impersonation, honestly. So it will be kind of like you finding yourself, you know, like growing up and fighting. I really loved the romance that it's here. It's an enemies to lovers and it's really a slow burn. I loved how witty the characters were. I really believe that it's an amazing blend between a character and a plot-driven story. It currently has a 3.85 stars on Goodreads and it has been rated by a little bit more than 44,000 users. And Flame in the Mist will follow our girl Mariko, who is about to get wet, and along the way she gets attacked and, you know, a lot of people gets killed, and so from that point onwards she will set herself on a revenge path. But in order to do so, she will need to impersonate herself as a boy, and while doing so we will see how Mariko will need to play a role that really transcends this accident. And because we are greedy and we want more, let's go to another 2 recommendations. The first one, it's Sorcery of Thorns, and this book really stole my heart. It has this very compelling world building. It's ambient, it's fantastic, and its premise is that we will have this girl that lives in this library and she takes care of the books because books can be mean, and one day something terrible happens and she will need to run away, but she will be escorted by this sorcerer. The tricky thing here is that she is terrified about sorcerers and she has very good reasons to fear them, because for these sorcerers to be able to perform magic they need to bond with demons. Honestly, the dynamics are outstanding, are beautiful, are hilarious. And the last one, it's Belladonna, which has a prologue that it's truly top-notch. It's outstanding. It follows the relationship of our girl who discovers that she cannot die with death, and at its core in this story we will find a mystery to be solved, and it is really gothic, but we will have these balls, these masquerades. It's fascinating. I think it is fantastic. But if you want things a little bit more spicy than what you usually get with the young adult books, let's move to the new adult side, right? Like, you are used to read things that are spicy, and in here we'll have books that will give you all of that spice. Right, then if you are used to read new adult, we will have 2 books that are a little bit more spicy, but again it has this world building that it's really soft magic, so there are not clear rules around the magic, but it has a good world building around it. The first book, it's going to be,
everyone knows it at this point, A Court of Thorns and Roses.
And A Court of Thorns and Roses has already finished. It's very popular, so if you haven't read it, It's kind of like a must. I really enjoyed it back then when I read it. 5 years ago it's been already, but it really got me into reading again. I think this is one of the main things that fantasy romance has, that it really grabs you, it keeps you very, very, very hooked to the plot, to the relationship of our characters. And because of these, I ignited again my love for fantasy, not just fantasy romance, but overall fantasy. So really recommend if you are searching a way to get into fantasy. And A Court of Thorns and Roses, it's a portal fantasy, which means that we will have two worlds, the human and then the fae. We will start with a girl fairy being in the human world, and due to some event that happens right at the beginning of the book, she gets kidnapped in a way and she is drawn to the fairy world, to one of the different courts that exist. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, so she will be kind of like in this spring court. She will meet this character that is tormented. There's this curse that she needs to break, all of that kind of stuff. It really changes though through books 2 and 3, so it starts being this retelling, but it won't continue that way.
I promise it will be sexy eventually, and I really enjoyed it.
And then we continue with Kingdom of the Wicked. Kingdom of the Wicked was so fun. It's an unconcluded trilogy. 2 books are already out. First book, it's less new adult than the second book, and first book, it's mainly about our main character and slowly building this relationship. And honestly, at its core, first book, it's a mystery. It's a little bit of a thriller. It really has enemies to lovers though, and has a very good pace, because Kingdom of the Wicked talks about our girl who is a witch, and we will live in this world where the witches exist, but they need to be really isolated one from another because they are afraid of the Inquisition and honestly just being burned. And our main character is such a good girl. She helps her people, but something very early on happens that set her in a very different path and really pushes her limits to the point to which she will need to contact a demon, one of the princes of hell. What I thought it was really interesting about Kingdom of the Wicked, it's this story of these 7 princes of hell that are the 7 sins reincarnated, the different witches and demons vibe. It was also really, really, really interesting. They both are witches. Black Witch, it's very, very, very different from Kingdom of the Wicked. I think that Kingdom of the Wicked had a little bit more of the witchery. In here, it's just you having a wand and, you know, just coexisting with different species and mainly having elemental magic. Meanwhile, in here, they do have these different rituals and there's a little bit more of lore around it. And we will, of course, talk about a book by Sarah J. Maas, Throne of Glass. This is a concluded series, 7 books, so you will have a lot to read here. Throne of Glass, it's widely popular. It has a 4.21 stars and it has been rated by more than 700,000 users. And this is a series that really changes a lot. Like, first 2-3 books, I guess, there's one way, and then from book 3 onwards, there's such a bigger jump. But I really believed that the world building and the characters were really fascinating. First book, it's a little bit more about a tournament, you know, a chosen one. And Throne of Glass will tell the story of our girl Selena, and she is this very incredible warrior. But, you know, something happened in the past, and now she's kind of like a slave. And one day, the prince of this kingdom comes seeking Selena's help because he wants her to be his champion in a set of tournaments that are about to happen. And when Selena gets there, what she will find, it's not only that the tournaments are very, very difficult, but there's also a mystery to unravel. And then we go to another saga that it's very long. It's gonna be 8 books long this year. The last one will be published. This is a bully romance, and we're talking about the Zodiac Academy. First book, The Awakening. There's gonna be a lot of romance, there's gonna be a lot of slow burns, and overall a lot of pain. And the story will kick off with our 2 girls living in the human world, and you know, they don't knowing that they are fae. But then one day, this very sexy professor comes and gets them and sends them into the fae world, into this academy. And there, they will need to hone their magical abilities. They're thought to be mastered fire, air, water, and earth. And although they have a great potential, they are also in a grave danger because it seems that they are the heirs of the fae throne, but people were not really, you know, great fans from this king. And now, kind of like the power has been restructured, and the houses that now are holding holding that power wants the power to remain with them. Zodiac Academy has 3.91 stars and it has been rated by a little bit more than 65,000 users. And let me give you another 2 gems that you cannot miss. The first one is Between Wrath and Mercy. This is a little bit of a chunky book, and at its core it's going to be a quest, and there's going to be this second chance kind of a story. There's going to be a lot of family fun vibes, follows this premise of this land where people can have these powers that are called the divinity, but our girl suffered a great trauma when she was younger.
Fast forward to 15 years in the future.
We will see how something happens to her daughter, and that will be the beginning of the story. I think it's very good for newbies because it starts being really something that you can follow. It doesn't really feel as fantastic, but then it really evolves into that, and it has amazing spicy scenes. And the last one here, it's Serpent and Wings of Night. This book, it's right now super hyped, and I can see why. It's spicy, and it's a blend of vampires plus the Hunger Games. It has this quality that makes it really engaging, really addictive, and I consumed this book in a day. Really recommend. And the last category is going to be adult fantasy. So if you're used to read complex fantasy stories, I really believe that these next books are gonna make it. The first one is For the Wolf. It's as well a Beauty and the Beast retelling, although it's done in such a good way. It's a very different, it's slightly dark. In terms of themes, we will have these enemies to lovers a little bit, and it will be a very good blend between character and plot driven, to be honest. And For the Wolf talks about this society where people believes that the second daughters to the throne need to be sacrificed to the wolf. This wolf that lives in the woods, and that it's taking care of the magic. He is ensuring that bad demons don't come and kill people. So people is like, okay, you will need to, just be with the wolf. We sacrifice you for the greater good. So everyone kind of like acknowledge this, and this story will kick off with our main girl being, of course, the second daughter of the throne. I really liked it. It's not much about the magic, but the setting. I thought this forest that it's perpetually in twilight was very enchanting, and I was really drawn to the story. Also, the banter between our main characters was really fun, and also cute, and as well as passionate on time. So for me, it was such a perfect blend. And if you are used to reading adult fantasy, if you're good with soft magic system,
this should be it.
Let's continue now with a fantasy duology that is breathtaking, and that is Daughter of the Moon Goddess. This is an Asian fantasy story that honestly I loved so much. For me, it was a very good blend between a character and a plot driven, because there's a lot happening. The pace is pretty fast, but we will be following our main character throughout different stages of her life. So at the end of the day, we will be able to know her a little bit more deeply. It has slow burn, it has a little bit of a love triangle, and overall it's a quest, which I deeply enjoyed. And this book will talk about our girl that is the daughter of the moon goddess, and she has magic but she needs to conceal it. But one day she cannot take it anymore. She does a little bit of magic, and as a result of that she will need to flee the moon, and she will endanger her mom. And that's why from that point onwards she will start this quest on how she can save her mom. But in order to do so, she will need to gain space within the heaven realm. It has a lot of folklore. Honestly, the world building as well felt very whimsical, very fairy tale-esque. Let's move now to a standalone, and that is Priory of the Orange Tree. It currently has a 4.23 stars, and it has been rated at more than 100,000 users, so it's widely known. It's this fight good and evil, and we will be seeing different characters across this land, and the points of view are very different, which I thought was really interesting. There's one of the characters that really has this romance motivation. It really kind of like made the characters. And the Priory of the Orange Tree will talk about this land with a massive evil. It's about to emerge, this dragon that is really evil. And one of the most interesting things about this book is that we will talk about the East and the West, and both parts have a really different conception about what is this evil and how to approach it. And so we will follow different characters. One of them is Dragon Rider, and the other one is this kind of sorcerer. She is acting as a secret protector of the queen. Okay, so from this author we've seen Throne of Glass, and we've also seen A Court of Thorns and Roses. So now it's time to see Crescent City. This is an unconcluded trilogy. Book 1 and 2 are already out. Also very popular. It currently has a 4.48 and it has been rated by almost 300,000 users. Crescent City is such a difficult book to get into, I think, because the first 100 pages, like, there's a lot of world building, a lot of stuff is happening, but once you get there, you know, it's really worth it, it's really emotional, there's a lot of stuff happening, it's pretty plot driven, and you know, we will get to know also our main character and we will see her suffer and advance and, you know, mature, but a lot of stuff will happen, the stakes will be super high, and of course there's gonna be a slow burn and it's gonna be a chosen one. This book though, it's not just fantasy, I think it has such an incredible mystery thriller vibe. Crescent City will tell the story of our girl Bryce. She is half human, half fae, and one day something terrible happens and she will be deeply changed, but you know, she tries to move on. But then some years after that, something wrong starts to happen again in this city and she will be immersed in this investigation. She will be meeting this angel that is very powerful, and you know, together they will start to track the different clues and, you know, overcome what is happening. This world, it's so big, I don't really believe that you need to get all of that. And let me add here another 2 books that I am completely in love with. The first one is Stardust by Neil Gaiman. This is a standalone and it's so epic. We will have a portal fantasy and we will have this misfit that needs to grow up and have this impossible task. He will find love, fight witches, meet pirates, there's a tournament, there's a lot of stuff happening, and although the romance is fairly sweet, it is not that mature, you'll see how that part of the story, I think it's fantastic. And the last one would be no other than Bridge Kingdom. This is a highly political book. The characters are matured and there is a really complex political environment, which I believe you'll really enjoy if you're used to read more adult fantasy books. The romance here, it's steamy, it's slightly spicy, and there's this enemies to lovers at its core. The characters are witty, are courageous, they are independent minds, and you'll see how whatever happens between the characters feels really natural, and I really liked it. Right, let me know down below in the comments if there's any other category that you'd like me to include as a conduit to get into fantasy romance, because I'll definitely do so, and I cannot wait to see how you pick those books and love them.